Hi, really welcome to Live at 5, and today we are in East Yorkshire, and the village is at Flamborough. We're just by the coast, by the sea, and we're here for a special reason, because today we're going to be visiting the Flamborough Flowerpot Festival. So come and join us, good old fun. Before we visit the festival, I wanted to set the scene. Flamborough is a headland that can look calm and inviting, especially on a day like this, when the sea lies quiet under a wide sky and the cliffs seem to glow in the light. But this coastline is never as gentle as it first appears. Its moods can turn in minutes, and that changeability has wrecked many a ship on these rocks, leaving stories scattered along the shore like fragments of old timber. It's also a haven for birds and wildlife. Now, Flamborough sits on one of the widest stretches of the North Sea, about 350 miles as the crow flies for the land of the Danes, and you feel that breadth in the wind and on the horizon. Beneath the cliffs lie the old smugglers' caves, shaped by storms and tide, once hiding contraband and quiet danger. It's a landscape of chalk, weather, wildlife, and old stories. And it's the backdrop to today's walk into the Flowerpot Festival. The Flowerpot Festival is one of those wonderful expressions of folk art, a kind of communal creativity where the boundary between artist and audience disappears. Some of the displays are naive and charmingly improvised. Others are surprisingly skilled and intricate. But that range is exactly the point. It's an art form anyone can enter. You don't need training, you don't need permission, you don't need to be part of a guild, just need an idea, a few materials, and the willingness to bring something playful into the world. In a village setting where openness matters, it turns the whole place into a gallery shaped by imagination, humour, and shared pride. Flamborough looks like a normal Yorkshire village. But for most of its history, it's lived behind a boundary older than recorded time. Danes Dyke, a massive prehistoric ditch and bank, cut the headland off from the mainland, creating a community that grew up in physical and psychological separation. Inside the dike, people relied on one another through storms, fishing dangers, and long winters. The kind of life where you needed your neighbours more than you needed the outside world. Outside the dike, the mainland looked across the headland that seemed slightly apart, slightly different, slightly other. This separation shaped everything. How Flamborough folk saw themselves, how they organised their lives, and how outsiders imagined them. A village that looks ordinary today was, for thousands of years, a world within a world. And once you understand that Flamborough developed behind a prehistoric boundary, the character of the place becomes clearer. Communities that grew up in isolation often become self-reliant, tight-knit, quietly protective of their own ways. And Flamborough was no exception. Its people built a culture shaped by necessity, shared labour, shared danger, shared stories. Outsiders seeing the dike from the mainland invented explanations. The Danes built it. Warriors built it. Giants built it. They couldn't imagine who else could have carved such a vast earthwork. Meanwhile, those living inside the dike, the boundary wasn't mysterious. It was simply part of life. The difference in perspective created a subtle divide. The mainland saw Flamborough as unusual, while Flamborough saw the mainland as distant. The dike shaped the patterns of living here, but it wasn't the centre of daily life. The sea was. With water on three sides, Flamborough naturally looked outward, not inward. Farming happened in narrow strips. Fishing dictated the rhythm of the year, and the lanes all seemed to lead to the cliffs rather to the mainland. The dyke sat behind the village like a chalk backdrop. Always there, always marking the edge, but never the focus. Flamborough folk lived with their backs to the land and their faces to the water, shaped more by tides, by weather, and the pull of the sea than anything happening beyond the dyke. So it's perhaps appropriate in this somewhat otherworldly environment that we start from somebody quite literally from another world. Mary Poppins, see Julie Andrews' little face mask there. It's a pretty good rendering. It's quite impressive, isn't it, really, what you can kind of do with flower pots. And there's a certain degree of good inventiveness going on there. So full marks to Mary Poppins. And obviously do keep a tally. Do let me know. Obviously I'm not here to ask you today, but I'd be interested to know in the comments which ones have particularly kind of caught your eye. Now, this one I kind of really liked. It was it's coming up. Mr. SpongeBob. He is something my kids loved, and I kind of got into watching. Very funny sort of show. And it's a really good rendering, though. You kind of use a trough, haven't they, for the top part rather than just a flower pot. But I think they've done a really, really good job. I was kind of really impressed with SpongeBob here. And I don't know if you're kind of familiar with it, but it's a very funny show, actually. And SpongeBob is kind of like the capitalist dream. You know, he's got his rubbish job flipping burgers, but he absolutely kind of adores it. And that's what you get the feeling that at times that's how they kind of want the big corporations for us to be, you know, kind of completely blindly loyal. And feel completely fulfilled. Whereas Squidward, his kind of nemesis, is the rest of us. He knows how rubbish and terrible the job is and life is. So I kind of like I like SpongeBob. If you haven't watched it, it's a bit nutty. It's a bit out there. As is this horse here. I mean, any attempt at kind of realism with the pink lipstick and the glitter on the hooves has kind of been sacrificed, I think, for just sheer joie de vivre. Oh, it's a unicorn, isn't it? Sorry, I do because it's not a horse. We can see there the horns. So, yeah, very happy looking, glitter hair, everything kind of more is more. So, as I say, it's a sort of delightful opportunity, really, just to cut loose, isn't it? You know, there's clearly kind of no rules as to what can be an appropriate sculpture, but it works really well, I think, with the breeze, you know, kind of the glitter, and they'll be very happy unicorn. So, you know, I think it's very, very delighted to be here and be part of this show. It certainly exudes happiness and positivity. And another famous couple here, so American TV getting well represented. We've got, is it Fred and Wilma? Is that right, Wilma? The Flintstones, isn't it? A bit before my time, still on when I was a kid. Very American, I kind of found, in the kind of humour, very kind of wise cracking, wasn't it? That kind of whole sort of Sid Caesar. And the canned laughter I kind of found very strange, that kind of, you know, every time there's a joke, there's this audience kind of laughing. I did like it, and I thought there were some good ideas, you know, the kind of getting in the car and all sort of paddling away with your feet. So I thought it was good fun. But it was a bit above my head, a bit before my time, really. So it wasn't really my generation. But hopefully you'll agree, pretty good rendering of the Flintstones. So, let's talk a bit more about Flamborough. To understand why Flamborough became a world apart, you have to go back long before the dyke. Back to a time when this headland wasn't a headland at all. And that's the dyke, by the way, in the background, that kind of line of trees. So the dyke, basically like a big ditch, do you mean, that's kind of been dug, sort of separating one side from the other. Now, during the last ice age, Britain was connected to mainland Europe by a vast landscape called Doggerland. And what is now the North Sea was once rolling hills, rivers, forests, and hunting grounds. People could walk from Yorkshire to Denmark without ever seeing the sea. Now, as the ice sheets melted, sea levels rose, which drowned Doggerland, turning Britain into an island. And Flamborough, once part of a continuous landmass, became a coastal edge, like Mrs. John there, eventually, of course, becoming a projecting headland. So this one, I wasn't quite sure if it had kind of fallen off, it was sort of deliberate. Sort of looking at it, it became clear that it was to do with hedgehogs and hedgehog sanctuary. So I'm not sure, because I thought spilling out really whether it was meant to be propped up or whether that was a finished article, but kind of got the impression it was definitely to raise awareness of creating environments for the hedgehogs, and it's kind of nice, you know, that people care enough about these to inform people and help them to be aware of what they can do to preserve indigenous British wildlife, in their kind of communities. And yeah, over here, this one, I must admit, slightly. I mean, I know it's meant to be the man with no name, very kind of mysterious. But I was left thinking, why would you want to create this one? Because it sort of freaks me out a little bit. It's like the hole in his mouth there. He's very good. It's not a criticism. I just find him creepy. I think it's the eyes, the kind of ping pong ball eyes, and that cold fixed Clint Eastwood sort of stare. So, as I say, I think it's rendered really well. It's as good as any in the show. But I do find it something a bit kind of a bit eerie, a bit creepy. But I suppose it depends on your proclivities. That's the word, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose the kind of Clint coolness is your man. But there we go. Another part of the Flamborough Festival where basically anything goes, really. So coming round, we see again Mrs. John, of course, there, but another nice couple here. We've got a wedding party, which is rather nice. A bride. He's a bit wider on the midriff, isn't he? The way he's been kind of designed there, and he's also got a fiercely spiky hair, which I like. I used to do that when I had more hair, so I'm kind of into his hair. And I kind of like her. She's got almost like a Viking, like sort of Dane style plaits. She's kind of going down, so I like that. And a bouquet and everything it's really good fun. I kind of really like these two. But right next to them is somebody else that you'll recognise from American culture. And I had to check it first because that's a mop of blonde hair. But I think you sort of pull it to one side, it's clear. We're looking at Dolly Parton, who's been rendered fabulously with the kind of blonde wig there, and of course the enormous plant pots suggesting her ample bosoms. So I really like Dolly, but I kind of wondered why she'd been kind of placed next to the married couple. And then I started to wonder, is that other lady, is she Jolene? Is she in the process right now of taking Dolly's man just because she can? Answer on a postcard. Let me know what you think about Dolly and the married couple, and is that scene that's all it's kind of cracked up to be. So, as I say, we've kind of got this kind of gradual moving of Flamborough from being part of, obviously, Doggerland to now becoming a kind of coastal edge, and eventually, obviously, a projecting headland. And so it's only after this separation that people began to carve the Danes Dyke, completing out a process of isolation that had begun with the retreats of the glaciers. So the story of Flamborough's separation is really, it's almost kind of organic, a slow, natural unravelling of lands and connection. And as Doggerland flooded, communities were pushed inland or forced to adapt to new coastlines. And obviously that's still happening today, isn't it? Kind of coastal erosion and so forth. So coastal communities all across Europe, I'm not quite sure about the US, because of the stones and the chalk and the erosion, the cliffs are collapsing, land is kind of moving inland, and stuff that was once kind of flooded, like in East Anglia and the Netherlands, is being reclaimed by the sea. So, we think of kind of landscape as permanent, but in reality, of course, it's constantly, on the move. So as Doggerland, let's say this landmass between Britain and Ireland flooded, communities were pushed inland or forced to kind of adapt to these new coastlines. And Flamborough's chalk ridge becomes a peninsula, jetting out into the rising sea, exposed to storms and, of course, to erosion. And over generation, people here would have watched the world around them change, familiar paths lost to water. But talking of familiar, here is some of our old friends that many of you, of course, will recognise. And just in case you don't recognise the context that you're seeing here of Wallace and Gromit and the Penguin, it's from a particularly brilliant episode called The Wrong Trousers. And the Wrong Trousers, as you can see there, remote control, are basically controlling what Wallace does, where he goes. It's very, very funny. Of course, Wallace being the inventor, Gromit ever despairing of the kind of things that he creates. And, of course, what happens when the wrong trousers fall into the wrong hands is at the heart of this episode. A purely evil penguin. So here we see Wallace, and this is why he's got his arms up in the air. He's kind of despairing because he's not in control. These trousers are kind of making him walk and kind of carry on in an altogether inopportune fashion. But brilliant. I love that rendering. It's really, really good. Pretty amongst my very, very favourites from the festival. So, as I say, we've got this world of change, and over generations, people here in this village would have watched the world around them change. Familiar paths lost to water, old hunting grounds submerged. This is such a cute sight that we're seeing more and more these days, these kind of honesty boxes, and people just selling produce direct. Well, it's been farmers' shops for kind of years, but in communities now, people selling cake and jam and just kind of nice things, and it seems that the honesty box system works, which is kind of good, really, isn't it? It's a vote of confidence in humanity's ability to do the right thing when you provide nice things for them. So it's a bit like the tightest salt, isn't it? Give people a better environment and they'll make better choices. So yes, so you've got familiar paths lost to water, you've got old hunting grounds submerged, the coastline is being reshaped year by year. And so into this shifting landscape, prehistoric communities built Dane's Dyke. Whether it was defensive, ceremonial, territorial, we don't really know. But it marked a deliberate human boundary on top of a natural one. So the dyke didn't create isolation from nothing. It formalised a separation already written into the land by the sea. And seen from kind of deep time, Flamborough's isolation feels almost inevitable, as if the land itself was slowly withdrawing from the world. First, the ice connected it to Europe. Then the sea severed that connection. And finally, humans carved a boundary to seal the headland off from the mainland. And it's a story that kind of feels mythic. A place gradually becoming an island in spirit, if not in fact. And that long prehistory echoes through the village's later culture. The smuggling, the self-reliance, the outsider myths, the sense of being a community slightly apart. And even the Flowerpot Festival fits that pattern. It's a modern expression of a very old instinct to create a world within a boundary. Flamborough's roots lie in a landscape that changed beneath people's feet, and in human response to that change, carving identity into the land itself. Now, I loved this sign. I thought I'd need to show this. Beware of the dog, the cat is shady too. I just love that. And it's a nice house too. It just made me laugh, and I know there'll be those of you amongst it that will also kind of appreciate that. Got the church coming up, of course. So for centuries, people on the mainland looked at Flamborough and felt something was different. Not strange, not threatening, just different. And the dyke was the reason. This huge prehistoric ditch and bank cuts the headland off so cleanly that outsiders couldn't imagine ordinary people building it. So they invented explanations. Vikings must have carved it. Warriors must have dug it. Giants must have thrown up the bank in a single night. Now, none of it was true. The dyke is thousands of years older, but the belief mattered. It created a sense that people living beyond it were somehow marked by the same mystery. To outsiders, the dyke wasn't just an earthwork, it was a story. A boundary that said the people over there are not quite like the people over here. And that perception lingered for generations. But outsiders didn't just imagine Flamborough folk were different. They met them. Because the headland was never fully self-sufficient. Flamborough people had to walk to Bridlington for grain, tools, cloth, ironwork and market trade. It's an hour and a half on foot. Long enough to feel like you're leaving your world and entering someone else's. When the headland folk arrived in Bridlington, they stood out. Now look at this wonderful dog. He's got such a careworn expression. I absolutely love him. And he's kind of got the cats down there. And I don't know if they waited, but they appear to have sort of poo bins inside them. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But no, I actually love that dog. I think he's ace. And if we're giving out a prize, he's certainly the best animal. I think that if not the best sculpture, love him. And the way they move, I think it's such good fun. The execution of these is such a vibrant formula that the flowers next to these sculptures are moving. I just think it's brilliant. I love it. So it's now an half a foot to Bridlington. So when headland folk arrive in Bridlington, they stand out, not because of myths, but because of the kind of lived reality. Bridlington had a natural harbour, a place where boats could land safely, where the sea could be worked with a degree of control. By comparison, Flamborough had none of that. So Flamborough people carried the marks of a harder coastline, hands shaped by hauling boats up dangerous landings, faces weathered by wind that hits the headland first, clothes patched for cliff work and sudden storms. And when Bridlington folk came the other way, they felt the shift. The wind stiffened and the land narrowed the sea around them. They were still among coastal people, but they were no longer in harbour country. The dike became the moment where that difference was felt most clearly. So were Flamborough people actually different? Well, probably yes. And the reasons were written into the land itself. The headland faces the full force of the North Sea. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But let's have a look at this chap here. Now, for those that don't know, because I don't know how global it was, but this is Noddy, hugely popular when I was a kid, but actually quite a bit older. Eventually made TV shows, but he was more in kind of books and toys when I was a kid. And he's a pixie, a gnome, pixie like that anyway. Little guy, really sweet, good-natured, tries to do kind of well. Lives in a nice little village. PC Plod, who's the friendliest policeman ever. Big Ears is a gnome. He's his friend. Drives around a little car, and you can't what can you say? It's Noddy. He was lovely, and there isn't kind of much backstory. He was just a nice little boy that kind of did nice things, and once in a while bad things would happen, but there would be a happy ending. It's sort of nice stories for children, really. It's still teaching you to be good and kind and considerate. He's kind of like a kid that helps out, So he's like a positive role model, really, for children. But I say, in this environment, kind of the headland sticks out, faces the full force of the North Sea. So the storms hit harder here. The weather changes fast. A beautiful day when I was there, of course. The cliffs isolate you, and the sea surrounding you on three sides. And this sort of shapes the temperament. Harbour towns think in terms of tides, markets, and schedules. Headland communities think in terms of weather and cliffs and survival. Flamborough folk lived with exposure, not shelter. Big difference if you think about it. With cliffs, not harbours. With the furious sea, not the manageable one. So outsiders sensed a difference. Not because of myths, but because of geography. The dike marked the threshold, but the landscape made the people cross it, and you feel the shift. From harbour logic to headland logic. From safety to exposure. From the managed sea to the elemental one. And that's the kind of true identity of Flamborough. Difference shaped by the land, the weather, and the sea itself. Now, this is such a fun setup. I don't really know what these characters are, other than they're just all very cute and smiley, and they look like a naughty, itsy bitsy spider, perhaps. I don't really know what it is, but I love the googly eyes and all the legs, and it's just tremendous fun, isn't it? Just get involved. I think that's the entire vibe that I love so much about this. That it's kind of hard baked into giving you that little Bill and Ben. We'll talk about Bill and Ben a little bit, but the inspiration, obviously, the Flowerpot Man. Some of you will know about those. Little ladybird there, with antlers, little red spots. So some of these are really, really simple. It's not about complexity. I mean, some of them, like the dog, I think were absolutely brilliant. Some flowers make you happy, don't they? But it's not about artistic achievement. It's about taking part, isn't it? And that's as we kind of get into the village, you'll see more and more of these kind of examples. There really is an awful lot on display. Um, this one is kind of interesting. So we've got a major main road kind of crossroads here, and I'm guessing he's a kind of police officer or high vis kind of thing. But he's a very kind of chilled, very happy. He's like, yeah, he must be because he's got the cuffs, isn't he, of a policeman there. But he looks like he's at maybe a Pride festival or Glastonbury or something. He's very much in the spirit of it. He's certainly not there to feel collars, is he? I think he's there to enjoy and welcome all the motorists coming in. So rather than waving a truncheon, he's got, what do you call it, little windmill things. So anyway, that's what he's kind of working with is a windmill. So to say that we've got this threshold where it's coming into the sort of older part of the village now. That this was a land that was shaped by its kind of isolation, but also shaped by smuggling. Now, the coastline, which you saw at the top of the video, really, you saw a bit of it. The coastline kind of writes its own stories. Jagged chalk cliffs, hidden reefs, unpredictable winds, and a tide that can turn you minutes. And of course, we're talking about a time where there's almost no roads that are passable. So all trade and movement of goods is via the coast. And of course, in order to be as quick as possible, to be affordable, you hug the coastline because that's the cheapest, quickest routes. So consequently, everything is travelling up down the routes. Now, this one is it's a bit make of this what you will, really. I'm guessing it's a kind of gorilla, or it's certainly some kind of chimpanzee or some kind of thing. Looking very happy, looking very pleased with himself, sporting a lovely tip for a lovely hat for the occasion. I'm not quite sure what the message is with this, other than it's a bit different. It's a lot of fun, isn't it? So I'd like to say it's been kind of smuggled into the festivals we're talking about, kind of smuggling. It's a strange one, but I like it. And they've got a banana hanging off there as well. So that's what greets you as you coming into the village. So consequently, because you've got all this shipping that is kind of hugging the edge of the coastlines, at high tide, you can't always see, or you often couldn't see, these rocks that were very, very kind of close to the surface that could kind of rip a ship apart. This is one of the most dangerous stretches of sea in Britain, and it's a place where ships have been wrecked for as long as people have sailed past it. So if you look at this part of the older part of the village here, we think about these kind of smuggling communities. And when a ship kind of goes down here, it doesn't do it quietly. The sea kind of tears it apart, throws its cargo against the rocks, and scatters whatever survives along the base of the cliffs. But for Flamborough folk, that wasn't a tragedy alone. It was an opportunity. It was payback. It was the sea giving back, rewarding them for everything it took from them. And this is where smuggling begins on the headland. Not with secret coves or midnight landings, but with wrecks. Timber, barrels, cloth, rope, tools, food, anything that washed ashore became part of the village economy. Sometimes they hauled survivors up the cliffs. Sometimes they hauled cargo. Sometimes the sea decided which came first. This wasn't organised crime. It wasn't rebellion. It was the hard, practical reality of living beside a furious sea. The headland gave, the headland took, and the people adapted. So I love this lady as well. An older lady, shall we say, in her prime, perhaps, sitting there knitting, is it a shawl or a blanket or something, with a lobster pot. So again, referencing the fact that obviously this is a coastal community, that people have fished and seen the sea as a place of food, of opportunity, of enterprise, but also terrible danger, all these kind of lives lost and so forth. So everything the kind of sea would give, it would also kind of take back. But I love she's sitting on a lobster pot, leaning against one, knitting away with her kind of shawl there, ever seeing, all looking, an older lady that's seen it all and knows it all. I love it. I think this is one of my kind of favourite of all of them. There's a sort of this stillness about her, but again, just that gentle breeze again is pushing her hair around. So I love that. And just over here now, we have the castle. Flamborough Castle, or what's left of it, sits quietly in the middle of the village. A chalk block tower that hints at a much larger story. It began as a fortified manor, first rooted here in the 11th century, and later expanded when Marmaduke Constable secured permission from Edward III to crenellate it in 1352, in other words, make the castle lined. So in its prime, it wasn't just a tower. There was a hall, a chapel, parlours, a mill house, barns, a whole self-contained world recorded in 1537. And of course, sitting out on the headland, great visibility, so a natural promontory to use as a defensive point. Now, the castle's fortunes collapsed after Sir Robert Constable was executed that same year, and the estate fell into ruin. Most of the stone was robbed for later buildings, and for centuries the remaining tower served as a cattle barn. Today it stands as a weathered fragment of a medieval ambition, surrounded by earthworks that whisper the scale of what once stood here. But of course, in its place now stands a beautiful First War memorial. I say First War, of course, there's a 1939-1945 plaque on there as well. But all these were built in the early part of the 1920s, when we were going through the kind of business of kind of remembrance thinking, because a key decision was made not to repatriate the bodies from France and Belgium. So consequently, each village, each town erected a memorial. So here to the sons of Flamborough who died in the Great War, listing the names of the people, and obviously to keep them legible. So we've now got 1418 at the top of the Second War, 3945. But even in a kind of small village here, you got a couple of dozen, from the First War, and of course they'd been people's brothers, husbands, sons, etc. So nowhere kind of escaped. But it's a beautiful monument. Now, passing over, one of my kind of favourites really from childhood were the Mr. Men series. So again, if you're not kind of familiar, they were little picture books, very simple kind of stories. This was Mr. Bump, and his characteristic was he was at accidents. And bizarrely, as a kid, I always wanted to have accidents. I thought kids that broke their arms and got a pot on the thing were kind of really cool, which I know sounds bizarre now, doesn't it? But I kind of really like Mr. Bump, and would have been quite happy to have gone to school with bandages. And across on this side, we have one of his friends, who was Mr. Tickle. I wish to get past the rather colourfully done bins. But Mr. Tickle had a kind of predilection for tickling people, and he had unbelievably long arms. I'll come back to him. So M&M's, so we've got the sweeties are being tributed here. Little kind of chorus, very sweet, like an old kind of cartoon, that, isn't it? Imagine all singing. But yeah, Mr. Tickle would kind of reach in through long windows and kind of tickle teachers till they kind of laughed and this, that, and the other. So that was his thing, was very, very long arms, and he tickled people, and that was basically the storyline. These were not complicated stories, the Mr. Men ones, but we love them. They're all very small, and you can encourage to kind of collect the whole lot. So lots of them, but two great ones there, Mr. Bump and Mr. Tickle. So you're feeling ticklish and tickled, chances are you'd be having a lovely bee there, the buzzy bee, just kind of hanging suspended. And again, this lovely movement in the wind, I think it just really kind of makes the festival. I'm so glad we went on a day where there was kind of a bit of air movement, so you kind of really get that kind of dynamic feel to it. And over here, it was kind of hard to say exactly, a bit difficult, Australian people's land too much, so trying to get in. But I couldn't tell if they were like penguins or vampires. Could have been sort of either, really. I think they're penguins, but they could be vampires. But either way, I like them a lot. They're very cute. They've sort of got a smiling sense, but also big kind of don't mess with us. Lovely old stone here, the kind of historic, and I think it's a nice insight really into the sort of size of the original kind of fishermen's cottages. Very, very modest in size. And of course, you might have had a family of 6 or 8 people. Had a lot of children in those days. Even 10 people living in these, literally a couple of rooms. And you can see that the height from above the door to upstairs, very low ceiling, very, very kind of compact accommodation, but very, very traditional, really, of kind of what life was like in Flamborough at that time. So it's perhaps not surprising that in this tight-knit but kind of isolated communities where people lived hand to mouth, that over time smuggling changed. It became organised, deliberate, a system. Harbour towns like Bridlington had custom officers, tax points, harbour masters, and eyes everywhere. Now, again, make of this what you will. I think it's two ladies, like a hot tub, little bit kind of a Baywatch thing that she's carrying there, but the woolly hats threw me a little bit. Wasn't quite sure why you'd wear woolly hats, but anyway, just go with it. A lot of fun. I kind of liked that. So let's say that the hats have been smuggled in to keep on that kind of thing. So yes, you've kind of got harbour masters, you've got eyes everywhere, and of course they're trying to collect tax. But Flamborough had cliffs, coves, blind corners, and places where a small boat could slip in unseen. So contraband began to arrive under the cover of darkness. Tea, tobacco, brandy, silks, all the things that the government taxed heavily. Small boats met larger ships offshore, then darted into hidden gullies, landing goods where no customs man could safely follow. And from there, everything moved fast. So we've got the kind of lighthouse being portrayed over here, which we're not going to see on today's tour, but of course with the danger of the rocks, the lighthouse kind of very, very important. And very colourful flowers there. So again, we've got little flower people on here. Very, very sweet. Run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. So obviously the gingerbread man is being portrayed here. That's obviously him. But I'd never would associate with flower on head. But there we go. It's very nice. It's a lot of fun, and it's just another way of kind of getting involved. So people were involved because then goods had to move faster around the villages. Barrels were hauled up narrow paths. Now, look at these two. I think we've got like a footballer with these kind of stripy top. Not quite sure what we're kind of being shown or told there. Maybe a local thing that I'm kind of not aware of. But it looks to me like a football shirt and boots. That's what I'm going to kind of go for. But I don't know. And then, surprisingly, next to him, the next 5 animals. So I very much like the black dog, but I suppose a close second, and he's really second, isn't it, is this giraffe. It's been done with a good deal of care, a lot of love, and why not? Why not have a giraffe in the Flamborough Flowerpot Festival? I can't think of a good enough reason to say it shouldn't be there. So it looks like a little pair of flakes in 99 chocolate bars, ice cream rather sticking out the top of its head. So I like that. It's kind of very, very cheery. So yeah, imagine kind of within these little tight-knit communities, these small little houses, you've got bundles being passed from hand to hand, goods hidden in these cottages, and the whole village sort of quietly complicit in this trade of smuggling. Again, in the windows, just very sweet, very cute, and I was really pleasantly surprised just by how many people had made the effort to get involved. Little milk bottles being used, little vitamin drinking bottles being used there. Great fun. I love this name, Chuffing Cottage. What a great name. And this is the Dog and Duck Square, by the way. So wonderfully named. But yeah, within these cottages, this is the infrastructure of smuggling right here. And it's not because people were criminals, but because the system made it necessary. And then the headland made it possible. And of course, with pubs and businesses, there's always a demand for these kind of projects. So when the revenue men did come, they found communities that said very little and knew even less. Or at least officially, that's what they found. The ship in there, harking back, of course, to its maritime location. So why did smuggling thrive here more than most places? Because the land demanded it, really. The headland is exposed on 3 sides, with cliffs that hide as much as they reveal. Storms arrive without warning. Fog rolls in like a curtain, and the sea can swallow a boat in minutes. This shapes temperament. Harbour towns live by schedules and tides. Headland communities live by weather and instinct. So Flamborough folk learned to move quickly, to trust their own. Look at that, Scrumdiddlyumptious. What a great name for a cafe. To kind of keep quiet. and to read the sea like a second language. And it wasn't just the men. The men were the scavengers, the cliff climbers, the ones who hauled the barrels and risked the sea. But the women were the distributors, the organisers, the ones who knew exactly which cottage could hide a keg, which neighbour could be trusted, which path the revenue men never thought to check. So when the customs officer came calling, the husband sat by the hearth and his wife came to the door. Tight-lipped, steady-eyed, hands folded neatly on her apron, with 3 pounds of tea rolled up in the shawl around her waist, and a look that made the customs man wish he was anywhere but here. Because on the headland, silence was survival, and the women were its keepers. So here's a couple of women for you. Very glamorous. I'm not sure if this is kind of advertising the kind of hairstyles that are on vogue or on offer in there. It looks like maybe a glass of Prosecco, maybe an Aperol Spritz, but certainly dressed up to a party with the kind of glitter and the ballet and the wigs and all done up to the nines. So as I say, whether that's kind of on offer in Wave Salon or it's just a bit of fun, I don't know, but I like those an awful lot. So yeah, this about women really, it leads to something people often forget about Flamborough, the quiet, unshakable power of the women who held this place together, while the sea tried its best to tear it apart. So life on the headland, as we know, is shaped by the sea, and the sea took the men first. Fishing, hauling, cliff work, salvage, all of it pulled the men away for long hours, sometimes for days, tragically sometimes forever. So women became the steady rhythm of the village. They keep the hearths burning, a little old sweet shop, that's sweet. They keep the hearths burning. They keep the children fed. They keep the cottages standing in storms, and kept the community stitched together when the sea tore holes in it. They were the ones who knew every neighbour's needs, every family's losses, every quiet grief the headline carried. And when the men came home, exhausted, salt-burned, half-frozen, it was the women who brought them back into the warmth of ordinary life. But the visible work was only kind of part of the story. The real power of women lay in things outsiders never saw. They were the organisers, the planners, the ones that knew which path to take in fog, which cliff ledge was safe, which family needed help before they asked. In smuggling the distributors, the ones who moved goods quietly through the village, who kept the accounts in their heads. Isn't it creepy, that? I like it, but I don't know it's part of the festival. It could have caught my eye, and the raven there. It's very, very Edgar Allan Poe. So yeah, they moved the goods quietly through the village, into the pubs, of course, whether they were for sale, who kept the accounts in their heads, who knew exactly what to say and what not to say when strangers came knocking. A woman on the headland could carry 3 pounds of tea in a shawl, answer the customs officer with a steady gaze, and reveal nothing but the weather. Their silence wasn't fear. It was discipline. It was loyalty. It was survival. So were the women of Flamborough different? Yes. Now then, this is a character you might know, Dennis the Menace. Very popular when I was a kid. He was the main star of the comic The Beano, a weekly comic that I used to get every week. And he's very naughty, but he's dog Nasher. And basically every single story usually ended with Dennis getting caught and getting spanked over the knee by his parents. And it was kind of the punchline, the spank line to every kind of story. And we were kind of given this to read, a kind of reminder really of kind of what would happen if you misbehaved. But in those days, spanking, going over your parents' knee was the norm. Everyone expected it. And so in a weekly comic, he just kind of celebrated something that is now completely verboten. The world has changed and has got very different attitudes. But yeah, Dennis and the Menace was only one adventure away from an encounter with his dad's slipper. So with this kind of exposed environment. Oh my god, this one is probably the most ambitious of all of them. Um, I think it's brilliant, but like a lot of people, I've kind of got a bit of a thing with clowns. I don't know if it's like a Stephen King It thing. There's something slightly unsettling and unnerving, isn't there, about clowns? But that said, this kind of tableau here, which kind of got a hot air balloon, it's got animals in the balloon, it's got clowns, it's got horses, it's got is it a chimp or a dog riding a bike? I'll look at that in a minute. It's got everything. It is pretty two clowns on a bicycle. There, it is without doubt the best and most ambitious of all the sculptures in there. So I mean, if there's a prize, these folk should have got it. Roll up prize 50p. But at the same time, it's got that eerie, edgy clown stuff of nightmares element to it. But if you like clowns, if they love it, please don't take it anywhere as criticism. I think it's a brilliant execution. I love the kind of the cards, bit Alice in Wonderland there with the suits of the cars and the bicycle. The whole thing is brilliantly done. It is definitely a contender, a very, very strong contender for sculpture of the village. But as I say, it's just my little peculiarities that I find clowns are a little bit creepy, really. So that's on me. It's not on the sculpture. So living here demands resilience, patience, and a quiet strength that doesn't need announcing. The women carried that strength in their posture, their voices, their unblinking calm when the sea roared or the customs man called. Now, this is a set of characters that, again, you may or may not be familiar with. From the very, very early years of kind of British television, of children's television, of Watch with Mother. So the guy in the white with the blue stripes, Andy Pandy, who was basically a puppet, and the two other guys are Bill and Ben, the Flowerpot Men, and Weed. So all very, very popular in the 1950s, when a lot of the older people living in Flamborough now would have been children. These were the kind of the stars of kind of television. So very nicely done, very kind of naive and kind of harking back to an earlier time. So yeah, so women were the real kind of anchor of the headland. And a kind of a point of stillness in a place shaped by fury, and the reason Flamborough endured what the sea, I think, sort of tried to take. So life on the headland was built around absence. The men were gone more than they were at home. Fishing wasn't a job; it was a gamble. And then, of course, war took men away as well. So there's kind of constantly men being taken away, making it about the women really. So a kobold, a little boat pushed out to the sea, could turn murderous in an hour. And a family waiting on a cliff watching the horizon for a sail. So there's always every day. So the women learned early to live with that rhythm, the boots by the door, the empty place at the table, the long nights listening to the wind and knowing it could take everything. A man could leave at dawn in calm weather, and by noon the sea could be roaring, cliffs shaking, the spray blowing over the top like smoke. So the women became used to uncertainty, to holding the household steady, to raising children who might otherwise grow without a father, to carrying on as if nothing was wrong. Because on the headland, fear was a luxury that no one could afford. So we've got a family being portrayed here, kind of rather nicely. Father and two children, little, are they dogs or sheep? I can't quite tell, but definitely pets of some description. Looks like he's a farmer, flat cap and wellies. Maybe that's the wife sitting down. She's kind of knitting, so and a hat, so probably not a kid. But we've definitely got a child. I'm not quite sure what else, but again, very sweet and just great execution. Really, just imagination. Yes, are they dogs or are they sheep? I think they're sheep. It's like a woolly. As a cat, a lovely cat, fabulous. But as I say, it was kind of characterised, of course, by men being away a lot of the time, so it's kind of a lovely scene, but perhaps not the norm for many. And of course, then as the days of the men didn't return, a sudden squall, a broken mast, a kobold overturned on a hidden reef, a body washed ashore miles from home, or never found at all. The sea didn't give explanations, it didn't give warnings, it didn't give the women time to prepare. Now, in this place, Crab and Lobster, because obviously the whole industry was based on ship fishing, immediately walking down here, you kind of got that really strong sense, not a bad smell, a lovely smell of seafood, but I love this lobster. I think that this one, it's up there with the dog for me. It's such a great idea of producing, a lobster, advertising your business at a lobster potluck, um, but of course as well being part of the festival. So really nice bit of kind of marketing there. But yeah, really tough for these women. One minute they're wives, the next they're widows, standing on a cliff edge with the wind in their shawls, trying to understand how a man could vanish so completely that even the grief had nothing to hold on to. A complete change of mode here, a really brilliant rendering, I think, of R2D2 and C3PO, being done really, really well. The only thing I would say is C3PO, a little bit smilier looking, I think, than the original one, who was obviously famously very grumpy. But I love that. I think it's brilliantly done, particularly R2D2. I don't know what they kind of use for that, but they should be super proud. It really is an absolutely brilliant, huge film, of course, when I was a kid. And I'm sure still huge to this day. So the women learned to kind of carry that loss quietly because the sea kept taking and life had to go on. And this is why the women of Flamborough were made of sterner stuff than outsiders ever understood. The village was the sea was the village's employer, but also the executioner, and every family lived with that truth. The women kept the cottages warm, the children fed, kept the community stitched together, while the sea tore holes in it again and again and again. They were the ones who endured the waiting, the watching, the sudden knock at the door, the empty horizon. And in a place where the sea claimed so many men, it was the women who kept the headland alive. Now, I just love this. Where's Wally? Kind of hiding underground, kind of cheating a bit, really. Normally you're meant to be able to see all of Wally in the picture. I think that's pretty much the rules, isn't it? But he's definitely doing his very, very best to kind of hide here. So strong communities always create their own culture, don't they? Not because they plan to, but because shared life demands shared expression. And on the headland where sea takes so much it gives, where families have endured loss, danger and hard weather for generations, people learn to bind themselves together with humour, craft and imagination. And that instinct to make something joyful out of ordinary things is what seems to lie behind the Flowerpot Festival. It didn't come from a council initiative, or a tourism board, or a marketing plan. It came from neighbours, from front gardens, from the simple pleasure of making something together, and a deeper pleasure of seeing the whole village join in. The festival works because it's a collective. One family makes a flowerpot fisherman, another makes a unicorn, another builds a whole scene in the front garden with sort of clowns, and suddenly the village becomes a gallery of shared creativity. It's not about artistic skill, it's about participation. Again, wonderful sort of purple lady here carrying flowers. I don't know if it's a figure or just something to celebrate. Again, a joie de vivre, and again, I love the way that the wind just moves the hair. She's got a kind of jaunty look about her. So it's just about making a contribution, however small, to the life of the place. And because everyone joins in, the festival becomes a map of the community itself. You walk in the village and see who has a kind of sense of humour, who has a sense of theatre, who has a sense of mischief, and who simply decided to put a flower pot on a chair and call it a day, and that's kind of fine too. It's the act of joining in that matters. So what the Flowerpot Festival really shows us is that strong communities don't just survive hardship, they create in spite of it. This is a village that was shaped by storms, by loss, by the long shadow of the sea. And here it is making art out of soil and plastic pots, turning front gardens into stories, giving children a reason to run from house to house with delight. Another little doggy there. It's a reminder that culture doesn't come from institutions. It comes from people, from shared laughter, shared labour, and a shared decision to make something joyful together. And in a place where the sea has taken so much, the Flowerpot Festival is the village giving something back to itself. That's my take on it anyway. And I think every strong community creates characters, little symbols of itself. And as mentioned earlier, in Flamborough, the most unlikely of those symbols comes from 1950s children's programme. But more up to date, what was it, 1980s, 1990s it kind of kicked off. Brilliant representation of The Simpsons. So we've got Marge there, always in her green dress, Lisa in her red dress, and Maggie, as ever, little Dodie in there, in her blue romper suit. Maggie, not really much of a character, was she? Really interesting thing about The Simpsons, they made a decision right from the outset that the character was never going to grow up or grow old. So every episode finds him at the same age, no matter how many years it runs. I think Lisa is 8 and Bart is 10, is he? Or somewhere in that region. And Maggie's still a baby, so nobody moves or kind of develops. Particularly, of course, not Homer or Bart, that are kind of locked into their periods. And there he is drinking his kind of Duff beer. Homer is sort of a classic idiot, really. He's an idiot savant, really, I suppose they call him. Once in a while he comes out to being intelligent, but for the most part, just an idiot. Bart, of course, he's like the British Dennis the Menace. I was talking about Dennis the Menace earlier. Bart Simpson is kind of the American version, a kind of kid that just gets into all kind of scrapes. So, just brilliant that the kind of this Bill and Ben, which was obviously a hit program when people were kids, seems to be the inspiration. And his Queenie with her corgi. Oh, we do miss Queenie. And I know it's great, King Charles and Queen Camilla, and I have nothing against them. God bless them. But there's something about our Queen, that kind of unified us all. She was there throughout our lives and was this wonderful kind of stoical example. And here she's younger as well, a bit like how she was around the kind of Silver Jubilee time with her corgis. And the country the way it is, it's hard not to imagine that the world was a better place when we had our Queen around as a symbol of everything that was good and decent about us. But another symbol of what's good and decent, of course, this time from the other side of the Atlantic, is of course Mr. Presley here doing his thing amongst the roses. And what a brilliant job they've done here. I'm not quite sure about his little ukulele with the Union Jack. I think he's more of a Stars and Stripes kind of guy. But apart from that, it is amazing, isn't it? I mean, look at those sideburns, look at those shades. He hasn't perhaps got the rotundity that he may have had at that time, but even got the flares working there, the split the plant pots giving flares. So again, I think an absolute contender for the star of the Flowerpot Festival. So yes, funny, isn't it, how this is going to emerge? Bill and Ben were tiny, they were odd, they were cheerful, always slightly out of step with the world around them. They weren't polished heroes, they weren't grand or important, and they were made from simple things, and they lived by their wits. And that's maybe why they resonated here, because on the headland, life has always been about making something out of very little, and finally enjoying the scraps that the world leaves behind. Bill and Ben weren't just children's characters, they were outsiders, small, resourceful, and quietly resilient, and perhaps that's exactly the qualities that have kept this village alive for centuries. So when the Flowerpot Festival began, it wasn't long before Bill and Ben appeared in front gardens, not because someone planned it, but because they're already kind of part aspect of that imagination, certainly of their memory. And they fit perfectly. Two little figures made from pots and paint, standing proudly in a place that values craft over perfection, humour over grandeur, and community over spectacle. Children recognise them, older villagers remember them, and visitors smile at the sight of these two little gentle outsiders, reborn originally in soil and terracotta, now of course more in plastic. So they're unofficial mascots of the festival. They embody its spirit, ordinary materials turned into something joyful by the hands of ordinary people. So here we are, a sign there, Filey, Scarborough, Flamborough, Sowerby, and Bridlington. But there's a kind of deeper truth here. Bill and Ben are reminded that culture doesn't have to be grand to matter. It can be small, homemade, slightly wobbly, and still carry the heart of a place. In a village shaped by storms, loss and hard weather, the Flowerpot Festival and its little terracotta heroes are acts of a community united. They say, we're still here, we create, we still laugh. So Bill and Ben may be long gone as cultural artefact, but in Flamborough they become part of the family. And long may that continue. Coming to the end of the tour here, there's one more little figure just to share with you. And I really enjoyed my time in Flamborough. It's not somewhere I would have kind of thought to come had it not been for the Flowerpot Festival, because it's not kind of archetypally sort of beautiful cottage, village in Yorkshire. But it's got a lot to like. It's got an awful lot of charm, a huge amount of personality. But I was really, really taken, as I say, by the character of and the organisers just getting so many people involved in it that it just becomes a brilliant advert for the people of this community that can make this really, really cool, special, free event, which is so important in these times of chasing living standards. So yeah, people living by the sea. And you don't really see it in on the streets here. So I thought, again, we'd just close out really with just a view again of the sea. And it's very calm that day, but obviously a lot of breeze. This is kind of just behind the village, and you don't see it. It's only kind of a mile or two, well, a mile or two really, maybe a mile away from where we did the bulk of the filming. But you're right on the edge of the world, and there's always something about being at the edge of the world by the coast, I think, that kind of shapes identity. Particularly when your back is to the world and you're looking out to the sea. So that is your freedom, if you like. Is the water, and that behind you, the dike and so forth, is the constraint really. It's something very unusual, I think, about sea-based communities. But it's absolutely beautiful, and I absolutely would recommend that you kind of come and visit this coastline. I'm hoping to be able to do something more extensively. Go to Bempton Cliffs, where there is the Irish, the Royal Society of Protection of Birds Sanctuary, all the kind of the gulls, the kittiwakes, and all those kind of things. So for now, I hope that's given you a sense of Flamborough Head. It's a really big headland. I'm going to show you kind of a fraction of it here. It's a place that's isolated and stuck out, but it's a place I really value. So I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for your support. As ever, just a thank you to the people, the patrons that support this channel, and to everybody who has left a tip, made a contribution. It's really, really grateful. So thank you ever so much, and I'll see you very, very soon.